one, I want to introduce my new best friend to you.
Yeah.
This is Nancy Grandquist.
Hi, guys.
She is from San Francisco. She's a friend of Misty's, and I had the pleasure of meeting her Sunday night. She is a minister, but her and her husband both are, and she ministers in music. And I have never heard the piano play the way she played it, and the singing. So anyway, I invited her to come on and share a little bit with us this morning. She's what I call a normie. You know, she's not an addict of any sort. Well, I don't have her diagnosed yet, but you know.
You better wait and see.
Yeah, I might have to interview her a little more, but anyway, I thought it might be nice to hear from her in a few minutes about what she does to stay, you know, what the title of this is, Don't Get Your Tinsel in a Tangle. You know, the last week of Christmas, you know, the preparation for Christmas and all sometimes can get stressful, and it's really needs to be, and it is the happiest time of the year, but sometimes I think we push ourselves, try to do too much, get too much into the time, and so this is a little bit like what I talked about for Thanksgiving, but as addicts, you know, it's really important that we, number one, take care of our recovery, regardless of or no matter what. And sometimes it's not always easy to, you know, for eating disorder people to get their meals in the right time. And it's important that we do that, regardless of what other people are doing. And so I just thought I'd go over a few things. You know, it is a happy time of the year, and it can be the saddest time of the year. You know, if you have had a loved one, if you've lost someone this past year, there's going to be a vacant seat at the table. And so, you know, there's grief at this time of the year, but also there can be a lot of happiness. So, but a lot of times it brings on panic, depression, stress, and Misty and I were in town yesterday, and I was just seeing people go and run around and just, you know, and I thought, you know, and this is for the birth of Jesus. You know, but it's, but that's okay. I mean, he wants us to be joyful, wants us to have fun. So I'm going to give you just a few guidelines for, you know, I don't care if we have 25 years of sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous, or if we have 2 days, it's still, you know, if you're early in recovery at Overeaters Anonymous, whatever, you need to go in it with some guidelines and some tools. And one of the things that I really recommend is stay on your daily routine of prayer and meditation. Don't get so busy that we miss the point. You know, what I was told early on in my recovery, and you've heard me say this before, is to make conscious contact with God before I make conscious contact with people, and I'm less likely to mess up the day. So that's one of the things top on the list, is don't get so busy that you don't have time first thing of the morning to do your prayer and meditation. You know, we pray and ask God, invite him into our addiction, ask for another day of abstinence, and thank him at night. And so reach out. The second thing is, during this time, reach out to sponsors and go to meetings. And there's a lot of need, particularly now in meetings, or I don't know about in your town, but there's a lot of meetings, a lot of need inside the meetings. So go to meetings and see what you can give, not always take away, because, when we give, we receive. So, you know, get to meetings and also line up your support to make sure that you have support that you can call, and also be supportive of others. Okay, another thing is push the pause button. Just kind of pause and breathe. You know, when you get real busy, just take a step back and just, and ask yourself, 100 years from now, how important is all this going to be? You know?
Right.
And so, on your daily recovery, which recovery is a gift from God. It's God's grace. And around this time when we celebrate the birthday of Jesus, this is not the time to throw your recovery back in his face. A lot of people relapse around the holidays. And what we say is, you know, what that is saying is, God, I can do this myself. And, you know, so really stay close to your support. And then when you go, for those of us with eating disorders, stay on your meal plan. You know, most of the time, I mean, regardless of where you go, you can pretty much find whatever you need to eat somewhere. But always take something, that you know that you can eat. And take enough, like I've said at Thanksgiving, take enough for everybody, because invariably if you take this dish just for you, everyone will want to buy it, regardless of what it is. So take plenty. And then, we talked about this all at Thanksgiving, is don't talk politics. That old uncle that's sitting over there in the corner, he would just love to get into an argument about politics, and just go over and love on him, but don't talk politics. That is not the best thing in the world around family members. And for alcoholics, if you're really new in recovery from alcohol, be very careful where you go. Later on in your recovery, God can and will remove that desire to drink. But right at first, sometimes we're just holding on, just white knuckling it. So be very careful. Where the parties you go to, most of them, people will be drinking. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells us, that we will have a period, a time of neutrality, where that a mental obsession to drink will be removed, and we can go anywhere and not drink. We don't want to make a practice of hanging out at bars. If you keep going to a barbershop, you're going to get a haircut, so we don't need to hang out at bars. But during this season, if you find yourself at parties, people are going to be drinking, and that is, don't try to regulate anyone else's drinking. Do not preach. Sometimes they'll ask you, if you're new in recovery, they'll want to talk to you about it. Don't get into that, because we don't argue about our sobriety. If you can be helpful, you certainly can. So have an exit plan. If you get somewhere and the going gets tough, you get into some anxiety, have an exit plan. And early in sobriety, you just have to be very careful. Your abstinence, your recovery means more than anything, and it's harder to maintain sometimes around the holidays. So when you go, have a plan to exit if you have to. You don't have to make any great big deal about it, and just thank your hostess, and then leave and go to a meeting, or go help someone else. And so one of the things is relax and take it easy. These last few days is sometimes pretty hectic. It doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be. And the best that you can, just relax and take it easy. So I have asked Nancy if she would share with us how, like I said, she travels the world. She's a minister. She's written music. She's fabulous. I'll just say that. She is fabulous. And I've just put her on the spot and asked her, I said, would you like to do this Zoom with me? And so here we are. So Nancy, why don't you share with us how you keep your peace and serenity during the holidays?
Well, thank you so much, Minnie, Tenny.
Well, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. I'm so honored to be here with you and your people on this screen. And I'm humbled. I really am to be here. And I love your Misty. I've known her since she was a baby. And she has grown into such a fabulous, incredible human being.
Yes, she has.
But, I turned 71 last month. And in these years, I've known some amazing moments, and I've known some real disappointments. It's just part of the journey of humanity. But I think that it's so important that we understand our value. A lot of times, like I realized a few years ago, I had something really cataclysmic happen a few years ago in our ministry, and I realized that I had an addiction to pleasing people.
We have a word for that.
Do you? What is it?
I'm diagnosing you already. It's
Good.
called codependency.
Well, there I am, right here on the screen.
She just became one of us.
What do you know? So there's not a thing normal about me. Of course, I already knew that, Minnie, before we ever got on the screen. Everybody, my family, whatever, they all say, Mother, you are the most weirdest, amazing human. But that has been a huge working point for me, is to understand my value and who I am in Christ, not according to what the world or our social media or anybody thinks or says, but who I am inside and what I have to offer. And that's what I wanted all of you to understand, your great worth. And all of us come, I just gave Minnie, you haven't read it yet, but I have some cookbooks. So it was crazy. During the pandemic, I started doing a cooking show on Facebook. My mother was living with us, and my mother's a great cook. She passed away just 2 years ago. But during the pandemic, I was cooking, and then all of a sudden, someone said, well, there's a lot of homeless people encampments around, so why don't you? So I started cooking for about 100 people a week and taking it out to the encampments. Well, what I was experiencing, I became so close to these people. And I loved them so much, but I realized that so much of what was happening in these encampments is these people did not understand their great value and worth. And as I was ministering and loving, and I had a group of people helping me, it was so fulfilling just to take love and acceptance and good food to these people. Well, out of this, I did this recipe book. Well, the first printing of this recipe book, one of them is what I gave to you.
Oh, good.
But what happened is the man that printed it, he's the granddad who started this company, and he got the files mixed up. And these were not the perfect files. These were the imperfect files. And they printed 1,000 recipe books that are not right. I wrote a story about my mother, and it leaves half of the story off. And there's all these imperfections in this recipe book. That's what I brought to you. And so anyway, it was, they felt bad, and they said, here you go, just have these 1,000 imperfect books. And then I did print some good ones. I'm all out of those. But my point is that even in our imperfections, our deficits, in things that we fall short in, there's such beauty. And we need to understand that in ourselves, without presence of Christ in our lives, we're just going to fail. It's going to fall short.
We're fallible human beings.
We are. And even in the recipe book, there's so many wonderful stories. I just wrote stories. I've been in 102 countries in the world, traveled. I've slept in India. I've slept on mud floors and fought mosquitoes big enough to carry my body out of the room. But this is the truth. In every part of humanity, everywhere I've been, we're all the same.
Yeah. the end of the day, we're all the same.
That's the truth.
Mhm.
We need to be loved, and we need to love, because in giving we receive. And one of the things that Richard M. and I, we just celebrated 53 years of marriage yesterday. Yeah, and we were talking about, wow, this has been amazing. Thank you for your hand clap over there. Thank you for that. It's been an amazing journey, but wow, have we ever had some serious times to work through imperfect people in marriages. And we have 4 kids and 15 grandkids. And so in all of this, we lean heavy on the Lord. And something that we have talked about is that I trust the character of Jesus Christ. I trust the character of God. Why? Because he has brought us through some of the darkest days, some of the hardest times. But I trust his character. He's proved himself. He will be what we need.
Well, thank you, Nancy. And as we go on, if you have something else, we'll just step in and we'll just talk. But thank you; those are wise words. And like we were saying, and I'm glad we've got her diagnosed now because she does sound like a codependent. We want her to be one of us.
Yes, I am one of you. Absolutely.
What we all are just perfectly imperfect human beings. So I want to hear from y'all. What do you do during the holidays to keep the stress level down and to stay right-sized and centered in God's will? What do each of you do? Because I've got some long-term people on here, and Bill just his picture just went off. But I've got some people on here that can have a lot to share. Joseph, what do you do? I know you were adjusting your mic, but you look like you were waving your hand. Joseph, what do you do? You've got some years of sobriety and you're newly married, so this Christmas will be different. So what do you do to stay in peace and serenity during the holidays?